Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a special day and time for me. I don't normally stream on Saturdays, but I do it every once in a while when I have a guest that my regular time is inconvenient for. And that was the case with Jena. Welcome, Jena.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you for being accommodative. I appreciate it. It's a busy month for me. So like late shifts galore.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know Jenna very well. I first learned about Jenna from Atheist Edge. Jim Hall told me about Jenna and said, "You have to meet Jenna. Jenna is an absolutely wonderful person." And so
Oh.
so I asked Jenna on, and as we've been backstage, I've been intentionally trying not to ask Jenna too many questions about herself because I thought we would get to know Jenna together without her having to repeat herself on everything about her. So, hello, Jenna.
Hi. Yes. No, that's sweet of Jim Hall because I know I did his show a few weeks back, and that was I know I met him one other time. Maybe I think it was one time off of Neil's show or another show, but it was that one time I did a show, and I guess he liked me from there. So I'm glad about that. That I have a good rep so far. But no, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's start with what you do. Tell us a little bit about the content that you create, the shows
Mhm.
that you're on, and the things that you do.
Yeah. So in real life, I am a nurse. I've been a nurse for, I guess, close to 10 years. I guess I could say. I've worked in different specialties. Currently, I work in a health education department with a focus on weight management and bariatric surgery. So I assist with a lot of those patients seeking that assistance with weight loss. So that's a passion of mine for various reasons. But of course, as a content creator, I've been within the community, I guess, going on 3 years now, maybe more or less a little longer. And I have been an atheist for that long as well. I used to be a Baptist Christian. My
Okay.
family is currently still so. As far as content, I do co-anchor a channel known as the International Free Thinkers with my best friend Justin. Generally, we go live every Thursday evening around, I guess, if Central Time, 8:30 p.m.
Okay.
So we've talked about various things that all skeptics, non-believers have interest in, versus whether it's not just highly focused on atheism or religion or politics. So we have plenty of interesting people discussions. Hi, Shane. Good to see you. And so, apart from that, I do also have been a part of the ACA with the nonprofits, and I currently do all sorts of stuff with other people. I'm also have a show with Oz from Tang. I know you had him on about a week
Mhm.
ago, actually.
Mhm.
So we have a show every other Tuesday together on his network called Chopping It Up. So it's a lot
Mm.
of shared experience between him and I, and we talk all the time and do about deconversion, about various things. So having
Mhm.
that show with him has been a fuel for me to talk about things that are important as far as content creation and as far as just reaching out to folks that don't know of the severity of being, indoctrinated or have been through those things and need to be more outspoken or just have a platform or a safe space to listen and talk to and have those conversations. And also, since additionally I'm a busy woman, I am with the Promethean Secular Frontier, the PSF channel. There, I am one of the rotating hosts for their Women Atheist Unload show that premieres today. I am a rotating host with them, so I'm not expected to be there or anything, but it's that show in particular that they're starting off is very important as far as you know gaining more traction for women atheists and having more of those voices and that more of that presence because there is a dominance of white male, and that's fine, but we need more diversity, we need more inclusion, we need more unique voices to speak on secular humanism, atheism, however you label yourself as a non-believer. And I think that's important. And that's something I push for as well as a Black atheist and a woman.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking about before the show is we were going to focus um, some on minorities in atheism. And I was thinking, well, I can name three minorities that you are a member of right off the bat. And I can name three minorities that I'm a member of right off the bat. So we both are kind of minority atheists.
Right. Yes. Certainly are. Yeah. Unless you have a certain question, or I guess I can go off anywhere.
Let's start with your deconversion. Now, you mentioned that you've been an atheist for about 3 years now.
Mhm.
How did you come to atheism?
It's been a journey, unlike
Okay.
anyone else, but everyone's journey is unique.
Mhm.
I started to question silently in my early teens when I
Mhm.
started to officially pay attention in church. Um, my my distraction was either sleeping in the pew or in the church choir. I always sang in the choir from like as young as I can remember up until my late teens. So singing was always a passion and fun, and less boring than just sitting and hearing someone yell at you. Um, so, you know, I, I always had a curiosity, but I never was really outspoken. I was naturally just a shy child. But from there, I guess you could say my true start began once I hit college. And so, going through college, away from family, away from that bubble of Christian friends, and always being at church and always having that just general community of folks, I finally allowed myself to venture and learn more. Um, I always held the position of trusting science. I never was a young earth creationist or never believed like the earth was only 2,000 years old or whatever it was, or whatever most young earth creationists believe. But I always kind of,
6,000. Yeah.
is that what, okay, well,
Yeah.
there. I trusted that, science and things that I've learned, because astronomy was like always a fascination for me. Just I made that equivalent to, oh, God created it all. So it makes
Mhm.
sense. But
Mhm.
science kind of explains more of the details that God didn't put in the Bible. So there you go.
Mhm.
That was my
Mhm.
rationale.
Mhm.
So once college hit, I dove into different things as far as learning more, thinking differently. I was embarrassed in a writing class, when we were talking about like pulsars and things like that. And I made some off the wall comment, I guess, to have everyone in the small classroom stare at me. I was like, well, I think God made that for a reason, or whatever kind of whacked out thing I said.
Mhm.
And then everyone turned to look at me like I was strange. And then someone muttered, "Yeah, if God was real." And that just like stunned me. I'm like, but doesn't everyone believe that? That's what I asked myself in my head. Like, because growing up, I just figured everyone trusted and believed in God. And there were many forms, sure. So I just thought God was one and the same, and languages just interpreted it differently, like Allah and Krishna and all that stuff. So that was
Mhm.
my rationale, but then that occurrence caused me to dive in more, caused me to explore and Google and watch documentaries, and slowly from that up to a point where I lost my father, back in 2010. I was about 20 years old, going through that process of grief, of losing him suddenly, and, having all these people say kind words and try to support and comfort. And I just recall one person, I can't even think who it was, but I just knew I saw red the moment she said this. It was just like, God needs him for a reason, or whatever kind of, thing they say. And
Mhm.
I could
Mhm.
have slapped her then, because I was like, no, I need my dad. Um, so that just was the main catalyst that pushed me into my deconstruction journey, which
Mm.
lasted for several years by myself. I was I did not dare talk about it or ask questions to my family. I didn't dare to ask that to my pastor, anyone. I just kept with my own silent research and kept with, pretending to be uh, this Christian girl moving into a woman that my family wanted and trying to abide by that for their sake because we've already lost an essential part of our, home.
Mhm.
And it was just mainly I have an older sister. So
Mhm.
for the longest time, it was my mother, my sister, and I. We depended on each other. That made me transition into nursing so I can kind of move away from school and trying to support with like a good stable job quicker.
Mhm. Mhm.
And from that, I it was a sad, depressing journey all of its own, just teetering back and forth into faith up until ultimately I just said, I don't trust or believe this. So
Mhm.
much anguish really hit me the most going through Sunday school with my mother and my sister. And it's like an adult classroom, obviously, older adults. And just the things that you hear in more intimate things can be the most disturbing versus hearing it in the congregation. And so I had struggled with trying to um, just tolerate it for the time being until I got home. And one day it was just too much. I broke down and I ultimately just thought that, I don't believe anymore.
Mhm.
I discovered what the meaning of what the atheism was. For a time, I had labeled it as agnosticism and this teetered back and forth.
Mhm. Mhm.
But in the end, I just was like, I really don't believe this. Ultimately, my struggle with keeping it was for the sake of my family. A lot of people would say their struggles came from, the fear of hell or not being able to rationalize slavery or whatever it may be. But mine
Mhm.
ultimately had nothing to do with biblical teaching. It was
Mm.
just a matter of a fact of I don't want to disappoint my family. I was already considered a black sheep. I was always labeled as always being against them, always, you know, not wanting to be a part of them or acting the same or things like that. So that was already damaging on a personal level. So to add to that, especially with the implications of being black and how tied Christianity and being black and the black culture is, it
Mhm.
was and being a woman. It was a tough struggle. And even till now, I'm most know, but I am a closet atheist. So no one outside of this knows of my deconversion.
So do you still go to church?
Luckily, no, because of the pandemic. So that's the one
Ah,
saving grace.
okay. Okay.
But I'm up until then, up until the pandemic hit, I did.
Okay.
And more than likely, it may be the case too, unless, I find better support and ways to steer away from it.
Have you talked to the people at, gosh, I'm trying to think of the name of the organization, but there's a support group for people who have
Uh,
left religion,
Secular therapy or recovering from religion
recovering
or
from religion.
mhm.
Yeah. Mhm.
I recall making a couple calls to their, volunteers. Uh, I recall listening a lot to Dr. Daryl Ray. I know on the atheist community of Austin's fan group server, they often every Monday host volunteer meetings with various discussions and speakers. Um, Anything as far as one-on-one, like, finding a therapist personally for myself, yes, through that and, finding, other, um, secular therapy help too, sure, but never anything grounding. I know presently I do deal with, um, adjustment mood disorder and depression, so that's something I haven't, kept with, having a therapist for, as of right now, but working on it, hopefully.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah.
Maya says, I told my family that due to the Trump years, I've lost my taste for organized religion and will no longer be going to church.
Hmm.
I think that's a great way to put it because you haven't said that you're an unbeliever, just that you've got a problem with organized religion. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think that's a great example, a great way to approach it. Everything it works different for everyone.
Mhm.
I just I don't know what mine is yet. Well,
Okay.
I more or
Okay.
less.
Yeah, that's one area that was much easier for me having deconverted at a much older age. I was 58 when I deconverted. And so my children were grown. Um, and so I didn't have to worry about what parents thought. I only had one parent left, and he'd always been an
Mm,
atheist anyway. Um, and even if he wasn't, at 58, I don't really care what my dad thinks anymore.
at that point.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Now my husband is actually still a believer,
Okay.
but we just don't talk about faith, which is kind of funny because before I deconverted, faith was the focus of our family activities,
Mm,
but I was the one that was always driving the train. I was
mm.
the one saying, "We need to do this, we need to do that, we need to be involved," and I
Most
was
women
kinda I
are.
was kinda
Yeah.
dragging him along, yeah. Um,
Surprise, surprise.
yeah. Um, one question that I have, and for you as a minority atheist or particularly as a Black atheist, I find it hard to understand why more Black people don't reject Christianity because of the way Christianity has treated them.
Yeah. A lot of us are still in that boat and surprised by it. And there's a lot the dynamics are very unique and interesting. And I'm sure it's very unique and for many other cultures and minority groups. But within the Black community, I mean, it dies back from like slavery and beyond,
Mhm.
really.
Mhm.
And, with the moving into the civil rights movement in the 50s, a lot of that a lot of that safe haven support, finding work, finding food, shelter was
Mm.
within the Black church.
Church,
That
yeah,
was
that
the
makes sense.
communal yes, that was the communal safe haven of where we can construct our plans for protests, find work for those that were out of work or could not find support for their kids, school, like I mentioned, school, shelter, all of that. So when all of that was so grounded into trying to strive for civil rights, of course that, stems from, post Reconstruction era and everything. But beyond that, after we gained, the right to voting and things like that, it just carried on. So it's just uniquely has just tied itself into our society, into our culture, to where it's like you can't separate it as easily,
Mhm.
unfortunately. And it's the growth and support of the Black church did help with survival, but it did not help with trying to live without it or growing from it or learning more, or you trust and move all your faith in God to support what you're doing, and when things turn out right, it's all but God's grace. So that mindset just stays, and it stays within the culture. And the unfortunate aspect of that, if you move away from it, you're pretty much deemed and considered not Black anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's that deeply entrenched. You're already a minority and you've considered yourself an additional minority within that. And I say even stronghold on women, because women in the Black church they have many roles. They
Mhm.
have this false equivalent of a hierarchy without actually getting the actual status. Because,
Mhm.
there's so many churches still that don't promote women being in the pulpit or preachers or outspoken or whatever. And so, a Black woman in church, she's always a volunteer leader, she's always the cook, she's always this, she's always that, she's always head of whatever fucking committee. I apologize if I curse.
Oh, no, you feel free. You go right
Okay.
ahead. The only person that objects to cursing on my channel is somebody by the name of Bo that's occasionally in the chat, and I haven't seen him today, and
Okay.
frankly, I don't care if he objects to cursing.
Okay.
That's his
Fair enough.
problem.
Sometimes I have to be mindful of that because I can curse like a sailor sometimes.
Mhm,
But yeah, the and within the household too. Like as you mentioned, you were the driver of you and your husband and your family's life to do these activities within the faith, right? Same
mhm,
thing with Black women within the family too. They are often the drivers of guiding the husband and the kids to raise them up to be within this, to guide them into steeping them into the faith and making sure they go to church, make sure they do this or say their prayers and things like that. So that, and you're taught this at a very young age. I was considered a little woman at a very young age. I had to make sure this was always on my mind and make sure I always did this, this, and this. It was too often that a little Black girl was scorned for doing something bad if she did something improper with her little dress or she was picking on boys or things like that. They were always scolded the most harsh. And the little
mhm,
boys were given the most leniency, saying, oh,
mhm,
they're growing.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
So the hard structure for young women, young little girls to be raised up as little women and on is just deep in you. And I was one of them. I was definitely one of them. So,
Okay, these are some fun comments, but
yeah.
there's a question here from the chat that I do want to get to. It says, "Correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of Christian circles, it used to be a way to dodge accountability, and once the name of Jesus is said, nothing can be discussed."
Hmm. I would say so. As far as dodging, I guess in a sense, creating an excuse, I want to say,
Mhm,
correct me if I'm wrong, Celine, but are you saying like a way of creating an excuse for something like, oh, if someone asks, um, or someone you need to forgive or ask prayer for, things like that. That's the created excuse for this, like let
mm,
go, let God mentality.
mhm, mhm,
I actually I have an interesting just recently because I'm dealing with like a personal kind of health issue. It's not life threatening, but it's kind of like gotten me in my kind of moods lately. And I had dinner with my mother and my sister last weekend, and I expressed how I felt about it and my concerns and what I'm doing. Like I'm making actionable decisions. I have a consult and all that stuff, so I'm fine. But I'm upset.
mhm, mhm,
So the instead of my mother approaching it in a more sensitive manner to her daughter, she pretty much said to me, "You know what, Jenna, you just need to pray about it. That's all you need to do.
mm,
If you
mhm,
pray about it and just take out a notebook, Jenna. Just write down your frustrations, write down your anxiety, go to a park, sit at a bench, write it all down on a notepad and letter, put it in your God bag." Put it in your God bag and throw it away and just let that be that, and God would take care of it. And I just stared at her. I was like, I I felt like two things. I felt like she was in a sense giving me some type of blame or of behavior that I was saying out of my pain and hurt, and also
mhm,
just writing it off as, I'm not praying hard enough.
mhm,
What
mhm.
well, yes, that's true. I wasn't. But I
Well,
yeah,
it doesn't matter,
right.
yeah, no matter what you do, nothing's gonna happen. Yeah, this goes back a bit, but Maya supports you completely. Maya says, "I was outright told he's a boy and you're not." When asked why, she was being chastised for doing the same thing a boy did, and people said
Mhm.
nothing.
Mhm. That was me too.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I struggle with that still.
Mhm.
We were
Mhm.
taught the religion with a lot of fear attached, so you don't question or express doubt. The fear
Mhm.
of hell. Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. That's why I just never really had an expression of a fear of hell. That was never an issue for me. I
Mm.
think anything scripture-wise, as I started to really read the Bible and know what it said about homosexuality and everything else and women and all that, slavery and stuff, I was just like, "This is a horrible story." It was easy for me to just write it off. Yeah, it was just like, "This is just a hot mess. There's so many inaccuracies. This guy's saying one thing about Jesus' birth, and it's another." It's like no one's consistent, and that was easy for me to let go. The
Mhm.
hard part was my family, and I
Mm.
think for most, I won't say for all, but for most Black individuals that are thinking, are silent, are closeted, are thinking of deconverting, that's their struggle. It's the
Mhm.
family, it's the community, because you lose all that
Mhm.
easily.
Mhm. Mhm. Maya said, Black Christians are really into gender divide. God made the sexes and gave us our roles, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
That's a really interesting observation. I had never noticed that. Yeah, I have noticed that some Christians are more progressive than others, some are more accepting of equality and gender, but I had not noticed that.
Yeah. Um, Within the Black church, there's a hard issue with homosexuality and gender separation. Hard issues. Terrible still. I've yeah, like you said, there are more progressive, congregations, and I've seen them. I've attended quite a few, and I'm quite surprised when I have attended them. Oh, you're sweet, Esther. I love you. Um, it's my main struggles with I consider I'm a cishet woman, but, I know my main struggles has been with the, slavery as well, but definitely with the views of homosexuality within the Bible, and not even so much within the Bible, so much of what the preacher would say that's not
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
coordinates with it. It's just like they just pull out more of their dismissive, hate, but they try to sugarcoat it in the grace of love. They're like, "We
Mhm.
wanna welcome you with love, but you need to not do this. You need to not be this. You need to be normal," quote, unquote. Um, I hated that. That
Mhm.
those things I could barely tolerate and stomach most Sundays.
That's one area where my story is very different from yours because I actually was not raised in the church.
Mm,
So I did not have the indoctrination early. I became a Christian at the age of 16, and I felt like I had a lot of catching up to do. And one thing that is kind of funny is that the first thing I did was read the Bible from cover to cover, and I finished in about 6 months. And I was just flabbergasted when I discovered that most of my peers had never done that.
mm,
Um, and I was even more flabbergasted when I went to a Sunday school class, and we were looking up some things in a concordance, and the pastor's daughter, from reading the concordance, it was obvious that she did not know how to use a concordance. And I
mm.
thought, "You're the pastor's daughter. How can you not know this?"
I think that would be the standard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, in many ways, my journey is very different from yours, but it's really interesting hearing your perspective. And one thing that I'm noticing, and I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I see some similarity between your journey and the journey of many Muslim women who, if they want to leave the faith, they lose their family, they lose their community, and so they have to stay even if they don't believe it anymore.
Mhm, mhm. I think the only difference is that there's not much of a threat to life
Mhm.
that most
Mhm.
Muslim women experience, so, but yes, I haven't deeply thought about that, but I guess as you were saying that, I that does make sense to me. I think so, because, you know, the man is, of the household is seen as the head, but the woman is
Mhm.
the neck, they would often say in church. She moves the man in this direction, that direction in order to keep the household how it should be. And through faith, through her many, many activities in the church and instilling that upon her young sons and daughters. It's that mindset that, you lose that support if you don't keep with this. You lose that community and support if you are not active, if you do not show that you are being of being of God's walk, or a God fearing woman, or oh gosh, I hate that term so much. Being a virtuous woman,
Mhm.
things like
Mhm.
that. All of those quote unquote beautiful terms that they want to label Black women to give them some type of false sense of strength and um, identity but in a sense, you have to act this way and hide. This is the most crucial thing. You have to be strong in all walks within faith as a Black woman. You have to present yourself as being the strong archetype woman, t- to not show fear, to not show sadness. And there's so many of them. And even as close to home for me, my mother, that are depressed.
Mhm.
They lack the sense of themselves, and they find themselves busy in so many things to distract themselves from their life. My
Mhm.
mother's just like that.
Mhm.
She's just like that. She does not none of us have gone to church since the pandemic officially struck. But my mother has definitely distracted herself in other ways. She works extra shifts. She avoids home life most times if she can. She's a very busy, active woman. But I know, especially stemming from the loss of my dad, her first husband. She's remarried, but she um, definitely, yeah. I see the pain that she refuses to show
Mm.
because
Mhm.
of what faith has taught her, because of what her upbringing has taught her. And maybe just because she has a stronger personality than I do, that I certainly agree with. But it concerns me how damaging um, the church has been to Black women, to give them this false leadership and sense of lack of self, that they have to comport themselves to being this way and not showing any type of emotion. We are very, it's very much like an equivalence of, toxic masculinity, to be honest.
It's in the
Like
white church
mhm.
too.
Mm,
I've shared this a few times that one of the things that I did as a believer was, yeah, I did tell some of the men in the church that I was offended by the way they would ridicule men with feminine terms. I said,
mm,
you're degrading women." And they could not understand that. And I found that mind-boggling that they did not understand that this was offensive. It's, well, so what? Why is that a problem? But for me, it got to the point where trying to be the good wife, trying to be the wife that pleases her husband, um, I tried to convince myself that I didn't want anything other than to please my husband. And so I would get up in the morning and I would tell myself, I am not a person. I have no thoughts. I have no feelings. I am not a person. And so that way I could go into my day, serving my husband, serving my children with no thoughts for myself. And one of the neatest things for me, the greatest experiences was after my deconversion and after my youngest went off to college. I went into the grocery store and I was looking at the cookies and I said, what do I want? I thought, I've never asked myself that before. What do I want? I want that. It's a weird
oh,
experience, but so yeah, it's in the white church too.
okay.
It's just more subtle for most people.
Mm, mhm. And, and I think yeah, I would agree with you. I think I've recognized it in, others that I have known that are white and, still either have hung on to the faith or not.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think in most minority groups, women are held to some particular standard, like same with, Latina hospitalities.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. Oh, especially for Catholic. Oh my gosh. Um, yeah, I definitely see it's the similarities, but definitely the uniqueness of the groups. Definitely.
Now that you say that, I'm starting to think, and I don't even know any Latino women in the atheist community.
I know.
I don't know a
Very, very
single
rare
one.
Asian too.
Okay, okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
Wow.
And that's something that's a struggle. Like, honestly, all I can speak on and all I can really reach to, or well, no, I mean, not just reach to, but all I can really speak on is my own experience as a Black woman,
Mhm,
and try to
mhm,
reach those that are Black women that are thinking and are silent or closeted like I am, to,
mhm, mhm,
utilize myself or utilize others that are more prominent, like Esther, like Cynthia, like Mandisa, all of them. They are
mhm,
very strong, compassionate, very good voices within our community. But yes, you're right. I do not see Asian. I do not see Latina. I don't see those groups, unfortunately, from male or female.
mhm,
So
mhm.
it's there's rarity there as well. I wonder how unique their perspectives are. I would love to hear more from them. There's a drive for me to not just reach Black women atheists, but just reach all women as a whole. And I just exclusively women, I mean, everyone, of course, but exclusively women because of the the misogyny.
Mhm.
Name it all,
Definitely.
really. All
Mhm,
of it that, ties within faith. No
mhm,
matter what denomination, background, it's all there. Even still, unfortunately, within our own community as well. But that just makes it even more of a point to speak out on it and
mhm.
make more faces of us. So,
And, with that, if there is anyone watching that is Asian, Latino, and you're an atheist or you are struggling with, is this true? Please contact Jenna, contact myself, contact Maya or Cynthia or Esther, and we'd love to talk to you about how you can
absolutely.
live with unbelief when you're in a community where belief is pretty much a requirement.
Mhm, mhm. And, and like I mentioned, I'm closeted. I still struggle. There are I don't I was listening to, I don't know if Shane Billowitz is still in the chat, but I was listening to his story on Oz's channel Tang, where he has a show called What's Your Story?
Mhm,
And one of the last questions was more the lines of him answering the freedom he feels now being an atheist. And I thought to myself, I'm an atheist, sure, closeted, sure, but I don't feel said freedom. I don't even know if I was an open atheist, if I still will, because I still have pulls and tugs to my prior faith.
mhm,
And my family, I hold them and think about them in high regard all the time. And I hurt for them
mhm,
when I see on their expressions or how they speak and how they struggle. I'm just like, you don't have to have that mindset. I keep saying, I'm just like, faith is just tying you down. And I have a hard time rationalizing this now. And this is like a lot of my talks that I've had with Oz, as far as, I don't consider myself an anti-theist. I've always just thought of it as, you know, it's 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 fine if you want to keep your faith for your own personal need and good. And that's fine. That's your own personal choice. And I'm not mad with anyone about that. But I the delusion with faith also is still concerning, even if it's for your own personal need. The false sense of heaven and fear of hell and being blessed and praying that things would change. And that's now that I've thought about that, I tend to have more fear of my sister and my mother's mental health. one unique thing was when my sister, like, she recently got married. Um, there are some more or less issues. Um, and they were together for like 10 years before they got married. And for a while, they took the walk of celibacy before,
Mhm.
you know, being married. And so um, one night I knew she was not looking well. And, I asked her what was wrong. And she just felt like, I feel like I made a mistake. I feel like I was told or sold a bag of goods to think that once I'm married, you're just going to have this blissful time because you are sold a bag of false goods.
Mhm.
When you're in faith and you're said, oh, if you save yourself for your husband, he's going to do amazing things for you and you're going to have a great life and God's going to bless you if you do this, this, and that. And she did do this, this, and that. And now that she's here, she's like, this is tiring. She had to come home to cook for him. And I'm like, that's the most old school shit ever. Especially when he's already home and then he has to wait 2 or 3 hours for you to come home and then you got to cook dinner. Ugh. Oh gosh. Okay. Uh, but on top of other things, it's with her being that um raw to me.
Mhm.
It was like, wow, I used to have that mindset because that's how we were raised to think, to know that you keep yourself for this and then you'll have your blessings after. But even now, I don't think that's the case.
I feel the same way about the theology as well as, just as well as the personal life, because I think the whole theology is a bill of false goods.
Mhm.
Um, because one of the things that I've talked about a number of times is that I felt so much pressure as a believer to demonstrate how happy I was in Jesus. There was always some elder that when you walked in the door that would tell you, smile, Jesus loves you.
Mhm.
If you're not smiling, something's wrong with you. Um, and there was so much pressure to, when you were with family who were unbelievers, which my family is split. About half of them are believers and about half of them are unbelievers. And so it's always been that way. And so
Mhm.
when I was with unbelieving family, I felt like I had to pretend that everything in my life was perfect because of course I need to convince you to become a Christian. And so I have to convince you that the Christian life is the happy life.
Yeah. So how much pressure is that?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's oh, that's so damaging. That's so crippling. Like you just cannot be yourself at all. That does not exist. And you have to maintain a marriage and manage this under, the belief of God and everything else. And I it's a shame to see the change and to see their ways of distracting themselves from real life. And I often thought that, it's holding on to faith is a bit of a weakness because you can just pray about it and let it go, let go and let God. And it takes a true, strong person to actually deal with life's bullshit
Mhm.
without having to pray or fast about it because it's
Mhm.
hard.
Mhm.
It is so hard, especially if you do it alone.
That was one of the biggest things that just it took a long time to really dawn on me, and it wasn't until after I had stopped believing that I started looking back on all the times that I prayed and all of the answers to prayer that I heard, because that was one of the things that that believers said to me, "Didn't you see answers to prayer when you were a believer?" And yes, I did. I had a whole journal of I prayed for these things and here's how God answered my prayers.
Hmm.
But when I go back and look at them, there isn't a single thing there that could not have happened the exact same way had I not prayed.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
you pray that someone would get a job, and either they get the job or they don't get the job. And if they get the job, praise God, God answered the prayer. And if they don't get the job, then it was, okay, God has something else for you. So,
Ugh,
so there's always, no
yes.
matter what happens,
No
the
matter
answer is
what.
God did it.
Yes.
But when you look at it from a skeptical viewpoint, no matter what happens, you can't see a God doing anything anywhere.
No. No, you can't. I'm like, that is I'm glad you said that. That's the most frustrating thing, and the most classical one is when, my mother told this story, and she's told it quite a few times, that she, was trying to get ready for work, and she left out she left out late because I don't know, whatever delayed her, blah blah blah. Woke up late, didn't hear her alarm, whatever. And then she knows she's gonna be late for work. She gets out into traffic. Traffic is very very slowed, and all of a sudden she sees an accident right at the spot around where she was about to get off or go past that area just to get to work. And then she's like, "Well, God saved me."
Mhm, mhm.
There's God didn't save that person. What
I
what made you the most favorable?
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
That's the one I really am just like, "Mm, okay. Think about what you said. Glad you're here. Glad you didn't get in an accident. But what of them? What of that family?"
Yeah, where was God for them? Mhm,
Exactly. Oh,
mhm.
God had them for a reason. Well, that's a fucked up way to, take them away from the earth. Jesus. Yeah.
That's an argument that I've started to make is if God is such a poor communicator that he can't get his message across without killing people in the process.
Some type of sacrifice, bloodlust crap.
Hmm.
Oh gosh, yeah. Mhm. I know, and I there's so many instances where people would mention about hearing God speaking to them and having God do this and that in their life, and if it wasn't for God's voice or me praying to God, that they would not have made the moves that they made in life, which turned out to be favorable. And I'm like, not once did I ever feel like I heard the voice of God
Mm,
as much as I tried. And
okay.
I'm like, is it just their thoughts voicing in their own head, but in a
It
different
is.
voice?
It is. Because I will tell you that as a believer, I very, very much felt that I had heard the voice of God on a number of occasions.
Mm,
One of the most profound ones was when I was driving and I was praying while I was driving, and I said, "God, show me how you feel about the world." And I suddenly had this overwhelming feeling of pain.
mm,
And I really felt like God was speaking to me, that this was God was telling me that I feel pain for the world. But, looking back on it as a skeptic, where did that thought come from? Yeah, it's possible it came from a God, but it's also, it's far more likely that that came from within my own brain.
yeah. Our
Um,
subconscious minds do a lot.
mhm. And another profound moment where I felt like I'd really heard from God, I had a dream once where I saw a child in a hospital bed that I knew had just died. I don't know how I knew, but I just knew. And a demon came to take the child. And I knew that that child was a believer, so I started yelling at the demon and telling the demon, "That child knows God. That is a
Oh,
child of God. You
goodness.
cannot have that child." And
Mhm.
I continued to yell at the demon until an angel appeared and took the child to heaven. And I really thought that I had seen something in the spiritual realm, that this had really happened. But it was just a dream. Looking back at
Yeah,
it's just a dream.
yeah. How do you explain that? Like, this is your guidance to the Lord speaking to you?
Right. And why me? And why was the angel late? And,
Mm,
you know, there's just so
yeah.
many things about that dream that just
Oh,
don't make
no.
any
God's
sense.
always on time, no matter how
That's
long it
right.
takes. There's never a time limit on the Lord. He does it in his own time all the time. I'm like,
Well,
"Okay."
actually, I know where I got the scripture behind the dream, because there is a place in the Bible, and I can't remember offhand, where there was an angel that was late.
Mm.
And when the angel gets there, he said he was delayed because he was fighting Lucifer in another place, and that's why he was late to a battle. It's somewhere in the Old Testament. If somebody
Okay.
in the chat remembers what passage I'm referencing, you can throw the reference up in the chat. But I'm sure that I probably had read that recently before that dream, and that's probably what was in the back of my mind when I had that dream.
Wow. Wow.
And we have a super
Oh,
chat from Shane who says, "Thanks, Granny, for a great live stream. Jenna is such a warm, caring person with interesting and insightful ideas. I'm so glad that I've gotten to know her."
thank you, Shane. No, you're great. I it's so I can honestly say a lot of people in this chat. Shane, I saw you, Oz. I talked to you the most. Maya, I saw Dr. Ben and B or Beck. You know, it's always B to me. I love him. B or Beck. He doesn't care. um, but every person, Esther here, I each and every one of them has touched me in their own way as far as learning from them and growing in the last few years. Some I've known for a while, some I've just recently met. It's fulfilling because this is what you see lacking when someone leaves their faith, when someone becomes a non-believer. The community, the support, the friendship, the people that you can lean on and call on. I think one great, to borrow a word, blessing from the pandemic was there's been more content creators. There's been more virtual community involvement activities, people meeting from across the pond, things like
Mhm,
that.
mhm.
I mean, it was you've had that before, but not as much as since everyone had to be at home. And it's I think that's so touching to know that, we are still good people. We're still people.
Mhm.
We are people that have feelings and grow through hard times, and we lean on each other and support each other. Complete strangers. I keep saying this for myself. I have never given so much to a stranger, a person I've never met in real life, more now as an atheist than I was as a believer. Like, sure, I did, my tithes and stuff, but what does that really mean? To
Right,
actually
right.
give someone money or a gift or anything that's like materialistic out of your own goodwill and not because a big, supernatural being says so,
Mhm, mhm.
I think that's even more genuine. It's more, compassionate. Okay. Esther,
Yeah.
you do some good makeup too, girl. Don't even front. I see you. I see you, girl. I love it.
Mm.
But that's funny. It's since you said that, it's a bit of a tangent, but I often had this kind of fantasy before I even did YouTube and everything like that, before I became an atheist and everything. I had this kind of fantasy because I used to look at like hair tutorials and makeup tutorials because I like hair and makeup, obviously.
Mhm.
So that was all about me following those people and stuff. And I'm like, gosh, I wonder how one could be like a YouTube person, like a content creator. Like that would be the
Mm.
dream, to be like
Mhm.
a tutorial person. But there's so many people that do that. So I'm like, what could I really teach? Now look where I am now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I did not think I would do this if it wasn't for uh Justin, my best friend that pushed me to do the channel that we do now. I would
Mhm,
not be here in this space. I would not, because again, there's a lot of risk I take by having
mm,
my face out, by
mhm,
doing as much as I do, by reaching the people I do. And people from my church are virtual too.
mhm.
I could easily be
Yeah,
found.
mhm.
And there's a risk there of, them having that knowledge and coming to my family and um, you know, showing me. But I think it's worth it because I knew what in the space I knew where I was in the space when I was on my deconstruction journey for several years, literally several years, just discovering things on my own. I didn't know Mandisa. I didn't know Sakuva Hutchinson. I didn't know all those prominent names or people I know now.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
I've searched and saw Matt Dillahunty clips like everyone else, but I didn't see me.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
didn't see that representation, and you get lost in that because you're kind of like, well, there really isn't Black atheists. Lo and behold, I only just discovered that they were just at the time that I deconverted. I didn't
Mhm.
know people like me existed. I didn't think that was a thing. I honestly thought there was something wrong with me and maybe I can strive and find more. And I did. And there's a rarity, but it's oh, Jenna is legitimately one of the most compassionate people I've met. Thank you, Oz. I appreciate that. And, he and I talk all the time, and he's just been an awesome supporter of me. I remember when we first met pretty much a year ago on Neil's show. And it was after the after party where he had said the most profound thing to me that I just took off running with it. And basically, he said to me was, um, I shared my story in a small bit like this. And he had said, you know, I'm going to do very, um, I'm going to be a strong voice if I ever allow myself to, just to, you know, the way I convey my thoughts and things like that. I'm not saying it verbatim, so I apologize, but it was something along the lines of me being a powerful voice
Mhm.
within the community. And I took that and ran with it. And I'm grateful to him. I'm grateful to each and every one that I've got to know, because I without that push, I would not have put myself in this place to be vulnerable. But I think the risk is well worth it, because I would hopefully, like, just like Cynthia, Esther, each and every one of us that does content, but they're out. Me not being an out atheist, I want to provide that demonstration of a person that you can utilize any platform to speak your truth and be your most authentic self. And, I'm learning. I'm still within my own journey. I'm still
Mhm.
finding my comfort and support, and one day coming out or not.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so, and I think that's okay. No one should ever push you.
Yes,
Don't
I
ever
agree.
allow
I
someone to push
agree.
you.
As much as I want to see everyone out, I totally get that that isn't for everyone. It's not for everyone.
It's not.
One last question before we go that's completely off topic, but as soon as you said you were a nurse, it was the first thing that popped in my mind is how has it been with the pandemic? Has the pandemic made, life much more difficult for you as a nurse?
Yes. It's a definitely different busy. Granted, I do not work in the hospital floor. I have done my share of rotating for COVID testing towards the early beginning. But and that was a hustle all on its own. But with where I work in health education. So a lot of our educational programs moved virtual.
Mm,
So that was, uh, uh, a knowledge, or I should say a change for most of our patients that are, some are more the older generation. So
mhm,
having that technology, especially in an area where it's either predominantly more white or predominantly more Latina, more or less they don't have that technology or time or willingness to learn all of these complexities, and we had to work and adjust to that. And it's definitely made my position busier. Definitely do feel uh the fatigue of it, but I'm proud to be a nurse. I'm grateful for it. I've learned a lot, and it's a passion that I'm carrying on, as also striving, because I'm also in school too. If
mhm,
add additional things to my list, um, I'm in school to become a health educator. So teaching and speaking has been a passion for me, for wanting to convey, um, you know, information to patients that I see on a daily basis in my office too, because I kind of do one-on-one counseling as well. But um, yeah, it's definitely has been a struggle, a change, but uniquely so. I think,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Before we go, when we started, there were only about 7 or 8 people watching, but there's now 25. So I want you to go ahead and repeat, what you have coming up and what shows you're on so that everyone that's in the chat can know where to find you.
Of
Oh,
course.
and a link to, gosh, I can't remember which link. In the description, I put a link for you. I put the link to
Mhm.
the International
Free thinkers, yeah.
Free Thinkers. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, sure. Yes, the International Free Thinkers is a co-anchored channel between myself and my friend Justin that we host every Thursday evening, 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. So, as of right now, there are no planned shows coming up. Just taking a brief break. But of course, we have a ton of content there where we've started a Parenting Without Religion series that's been like the most fun to do. They're pre-recorded shows that we put together with awesome panel of people. So, and then of course we recently did a hip hop show. So we do a lot of broad different things,
Hmm.
just as skeptics talking about things that we like to do. Just not always about religion or politics and stuff. I mean, we have those discussions. So, there's that. Oz there, I have a show with him every other Tuesday. I do this coming Tuesday, we will have a show together on his channel, Tang, Chopping It Up with Jenna and Oz. So that'll be at 10 p.m. Central, or 10 p.m. Eastern, I should say. Currently, right now, the PSF is running their premiere show, Women Atheists Unload, which I'm going to be a rotating host on. So just, focusing on women atheists and having their voices more outspoken and heard. And I've taken a brief break from doing the nonprofits just because I've added back onto my school schedule. So, I got to balance
Oh,
somehow.
yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. You have a full plate.
Yes. I don't
Mhm.
I'm crazy. I'm crazy. It really. But I have done quite a few shows with the nonprofits and I will be in the near future as well too still. So there you go.
Okay, very good. And if you're wondering what's coming up with me, I have a new produced video that I finished, and right now it is only available to my patrons, but I will be releasing it tomorrow. And it is a response to Eric Metaxas' new book, Is Atheism Dead? It's not a review of the book itself, but it's actually a reaction to his promotion of the book in an interview with Larry Sparks. And he makes
Hmm.
some rather interesting, bold, and stupid claims. Um, and this week on Wednesday, my guest is going to be, let me get his name again. Here we go. It's Dave Rowlands, Trolley Dave, and we are going to be discussing morality.
Mm.
And we are going to be talking about objective morality and how do you determine how are morals determined. So it's going to be a philosophical discussion. And with that, I want to thank everyone in the chat who has come. It has been wonderful having all of you. There are so many friends that I see in the chat, a few new friends. It is wonderful for so many. Junie, I didn't even get a chance. I didn't even notice that you were there. Thanks for coming, Junie.
Oh, hey,
Um,
Judy.
and Jenna, thank you so much for being on. It has been wonderful getting to know you, and I'm going to have you on again sometime.
Oh, by all means, yes. I'd love to be back. I appreciate you accommodating me, and I had fun. I love to speak about all things that I strive that is important. So I appreciate you as well for what you do. Thank you.
Thank you. And everyone, live your life.